British General John Burgoyne had an excellent plan to win the Revolutionary War. He arranged everything in England. The plan was approved by King George III in January 1777. Burgoyne would march his army south from Montreal, Canada, along the Hudson River. He would link up with the forces of British General Sir William Howe, who was in New York City, and those of Lieutenant Colonel Barry St. Leger, who was in Fort Oswego. All three armies were to converge on Albany, New York. This move, along with the naval blockade, would cut out the heart of the rebellion, the northern colonies, and isolate these colonies from the rest of America. And if that happened, General George Washington would likely have to give up the fight for American independence.
Burgoyne had a mixed force of about 8,000 troops, consisting of 3,800 British and 3,000 German mercenaries, called Hessians. The rest of his army was composed of Canadians, Tories, and Indians. He had a lot of cannons, 138 in all. There were hundreds of wagons and pushcarts, some of which were filled with vital supplies, and some were filled with not so vital supplies. British generals usually liked to take their luxuries along with them. In addition, about 1,000 women and children accompanied the army south. The few roads that did exist in upstate New York were hardly more than trails. The march was made even more difficult because the Americans felled trees across the path, broke dams to create swamps, and destroyed bridges, all in an effort to slow the progress of the British Army.
Well, they can slow me down, but they can't stop me.
The plan that had looked so good in the King's Palace back in January did not look so good by August in the vast wooded wilderness of upstate New York. American General Benedict Arnold was able to trick St. Leger's forces into turning back to Fort Oswego at Fort Stanwix. Meanwhile, General Howe saw an opportunity to capture Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia was the American capital where Congress met. Howe, after getting approval from the British government, marched his army south, leaving only a small force to hold New York City. Though Burgoyne did not realize it yet, he was all on his own.
Burgoyne did realize that his army needed a lot more horses. One of his German units, the Brunswick Dragoons, had no horses at all. These 200 trained horsemen were intended to ride. They had therefore been issued the sort of equipment that cavalry would normally get, including sabers and carbines, and boots that weighed 8 pounds apiece. Burgoyne believed the solution was a raid on the town of Bennington, Vermont. His scouts informed him that there was a large stockpile of supplies collected there. He ordered Oberstleutnant Friedrich Baum, who spoke no English, to depart with 800 men, mostly Hessians. His orders were to take all the horses, cattle, food, and anything else of value. In addition, Baum and his men were to collect taxes and spread the false rumor that this detachment was the advance guard of Burgoyne's army and that their intention was to march to Boston.
The Americans had no trouble tracking the British Army's progress, as Burgoyne could only march 1 mile a day. Every move was being watched and reported. Burgoyne sent Baum, a commander who could not speak English, on a complex mission into an area full of hostile Americans. It was risky. American Colonel John Stark was a highly experienced but highly independent officer. He was a hero at Bunker Hill, but when he did not receive a promotion to become a general, he resigned from the Continental Army and went home to New Hampshire. With a large British army plodding southward along the Hudson River, alarm spread throughout Massachusetts, Vermont, New York, and New Hampshire. Colonel Stark decided to re-enter the fight. Because of the panic created by Burgoyne's approach, Stark was able to recruit 1,500 militiamen within the space of 1 week. Among those responding to the call was Seth Warner with his New Hampshire militia unit known as the Green Mountain Boys.
March!
Ethan Allen had been the leader of the boys and would be again. But Allen at this time was a prisoner of the British. Seth Warner was in charge.
Baum set out with his 200 dismounted Brunswick Dragoons, 50 German riflemen known as Jägers. He had nearly 40 Brunswick infantry, about 100 Indians, 50 British light infantry marksmen, 400 loyalist militia, and 2 small cannons with 13 artillerymen.
Sir, we have reports that Burgoyne's Indians are tearing up the countryside.
Colonel Stark sent orders for all of the scattered American forces to assemble at Bennington. Stark left Bennington and marched west with about 400 men to intercept the Indians.
Baum's force soon encountered a small detachment of Americans guarding some stockpiles of food in a mill. Baum's superior force quickly drove off the Americans and captured the supplies. Baum sent word to Burgoyne about this action and told the British commander that there was supposed to be a small enemy force in Bennington, but these were expected to flee with the approach of the Hessians. Baum quickly realized that he was facing a much larger force than he expected. And that force was not running away, as expected. Baum sent a message to Burgoyne that reinforcements were needed as soon as possible. In response to Baum's plea for reinforcement, Burgoyne sent Oberstleutnant Heinrich Breimann with about 650 Hessians. Breimann's force consisted of 330 Brunswick Grenadiers and 280 light infantry. The Hesse-Hanau artillery brought 2 cannons that fired 6-pound balls and 30 men to operate them. Expecting the Americans to attack, the Hessians retreated to a hill and dug in. Baum received some welcome, but unexpected reinforcements when a small party of loyalists arrived.
In the redcoats. If we are not victorious tonight, Molly Stark sleeps a widow.
When Baum saw Stark's men disappearing into the trees, he assumed they were withdrawing. The Americans approached both flanks of the Hessian lines.
Stark used a clever trick to infiltrate Baum's lines. He knew that the Loyalist militia adorned their hats with white pieces of paper so they could tell themselves apart from their identically dressed enemies. So Stark had his men do the same thing. This little deception allowed the Americans to get right into the Hessian lines. the attack on the center, which was the cue for the American militia to remove their white pieces of paper from their hats and start shooting.
The Tories, the Indians, and the Canadians heard firing going on all around them and quickly retreated when they realized they were surrounded. But the Brunswick Dragoons held off the Americans for about 2 more hours.